Hey guys, Thomas Nickelodeon here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Wonder Park. Now, before I begin my review, I want to say that, in terms of this movie, I have seen zero trailers for this. The only reason I even know this exists is because I've seen other reviewers, take on this movie. And that's the only way, that's the only reason I even know this actually came out. Apparently, this is put on by a group on Nickelodeon. And there's like some other controversial stuff, which I don't know, but whatever. Um, I don't know, like how much that apparently affected the movie, but I'm here to explicitly review the movie and what happens in the movie. So with that being out of the way, we start with some narration with this mother character talking about this park that is on the rage. And we see, as this is going on, these various animals that you see are prepping up for this little park. And we learn all of this is a part of this girl. I believe her name is June or Jude. I think it's June. All of this is under her imagination. And the main, I suppose, runner of the park while they are in there is this monkey named Peanut, who is giving all these kids who bamf into existence when the park is opened, and the other animals proceed to cater to the audience. And when he is given a suggestion via whisper from the mother, he takes it into account, creates it, and then it becomes a part of the park. So they go through this little imagination moment for a bit, and then her dad comes in, says, it's time for bed. And she starts to ask the mother if she can make this park a reality. So the next day, she gets a call from her friend who has an obvious crush on her. As soon as we see him, we immediately know this. I think his name's like Bucky or Bunky. And he's the most eager to help him out among all these other kids who start to help her build this little like back street, like if this were to take place in a cul-de-sac like area, and if people were bored kind of ordeal. Like they start to just build things outside, with the parents really not paying too much mind. And from what I can vaguely gather is that some people had an issue with this moment. I don't know. Anyways, during their little get together and they build all these little ramps, she proceeds to go on with Bunky there and proceed to go down. They head into the streets, veering out of control after breaking these boosters that they had, which is done via, I believe they were fire extinguishers. So they start to go out of control, and then they start breaking things, and then almost get run over, but they barely veer out of the way. Then it cuts to the police going to her house, and then all these angry people that they have to sign waivers for or whatever. It's really weird. And the mother proceeds to talk her to her about maintain the ability to dream hard and big, but also be practical in the real world, which I think is a moral. I think that went over some of the people that were arguing, kind of went over their heads, to be honest, considering that this movie is, fiction. Be practical, you're watching a movie. It's not the things you're seeing, it's not like people are going to emulate it one for one. That is not practical. Again, I do kind of laugh at the mockery of something so early on being said in the movie, and then people like complaining like, "Oh, it's so dark," and the kids were so hurt by the emotions. But we'll get to that moment in a bit. So we see a montage of her, June, and her mother continuously building this little wonder park or wonderland or whatever variation you want to call it. And in the process of them building and building and building, we see the mother get a call. I don't know what prompted the call, but it is a call where her expression goes from being okay to being very, very sad. And then getting really sick. Now, I want to point this out, that whatever sickness she has gotten, though she has to go away, is never expressed like in the movie. They keep it vague. They just have her get these little eye, moments, and then have her expression change. And that's about the most of what we see in terms of whatever this sickness is. So I'm not gonna say that it's this, I don't know what it is, because she does apparently get better by the end of the movie. I'm gonna say that right now, so that, people aren't gonna be like, oh, it's this, and it's like, well, I don't know, she got better, I don't know what it is, okay? Duh. Anyways, so she calls her mom after, some time, and then, after she goes away, the daughter starts to, remove everything from... Because they had, during that montage, they had, built all this stuff throughout the house, and now the daughter is, removing it bit by bit. And while she's going through this downer moment, her neighbor, the one that likes her, Bunky, was, trying to pester her to come back out. Then sometime later, her aunt, I believe it's her aunt and uncle, come over, and they're so eager to also want her to continue building, and then she gets so upset by them continuously wanting her to continue this, that she throws her piece of the blueprint that she had for this park into the fire, and it cuts to her getting really protective over her dad, because it's pretty obvious that she does not want the same event to happen to the dad that happened to the mom. And the dad's trying to get her to go back out, trying to do their little thing. Yeah. So they have a little moment where they sing about something. I forgot what the song was, but she eventually finds the note on this bus because the father manages to get her to go to this math camp or whatever camp it is, and then that's where the singing was. So she finds this note that the father left, and then she sort of goes into a panic mode, thinking about how the dad's gonna fall behind and then get injured and stuff of that nature without her care. So Bunky assists her in pretending to puke to get the bus to stop. So she wanders off and she sneaks off, and then the paper that she threw into the fire, it whisked out of the chimney, I suppose, and now it is wisping her way back deeper into the forest, where she eventually finds this like contraption, uh, and ends up in deeper, as I said, deeper in the forest. She ends up in this cart, where she sees the little monkey symbol. So she manages to get it moving, and then she like goes further down the track, falls through, and she starts to like call out, trying to figure out where anything is. Meanwhile, or I should say afterwards, she sees Peanut as a golden statue, and then realizes that she is now supposedly in the park. So she starts to run into, or the characters that she has known to have created start to run into her. I believe it's Boomer the bear we see first. I don't remember all the characters' names. I think I got most of them for this, I think. So he's like running away, and then he like points to this dark cloud in the sky. We see that Steve, I think that's a porcupine or a hedgehog. I don't know which one that is. I think it's a porcupine. Yeah, I think it's a porcupine. And he is used as bait, as provided by that warthog. I believe her name is Gilda. So we see that all the other characters, like Boomer, keeps like falling asleep, and the two, I think they're gophers, on the ones on the right of the poster beneath the monkey. I believe their names are Sly and Cooper, which I found to be a pretty interesting naming convention, considering that that is a video game, Sly Cooper. I think that's their names. Their names individually, Sly and Cooper. So I don't know if that was like meant to be like, aha, it's almost like the video game. I don't know. Meanwhile, so Gilda, the warthog, sort of sends them off on their little task. And they're continuously, again, worrying about what this darkness is going to do. They talk about how Peanut was taken away, the real one, anyways. So we see that these little bunnies that are now possessed, these smaller bunnies, or monkeys, I think they're smaller monkeys, start to move this machine, and the animals and June have to like flee away from the scene. So she kicks up one of the fish things from the carousel, and then she starts like driving off, only to proceed to end up back where she started. Gilda still like sort of manning the others, Sly and Cooper, and Steve the porcupine. So they start to move towards a place called Clockwork Springs, where and all the while June is like still trying to gather the blueprint as it's flying off. Yeah. Anyway, the little baby monkeys that are possessed are like continuously following them below and above, as they are making their way through this new area. So the animal crew and June are again continuously fleeing for quite a bit, and in the process, June is saved by this saving umbrella via like sliding against it, like as this molten lava and all these obstacles are like getting in her way. She lands down eventually, And she comes across, like, she ends up somehow, I forget how exactly she ended up in this bubble area, but she does. And she comes across Peanut, who wants to be left alone. But, unfortunately, the other zombie monkeys, I forget what they call him in the movie. They, like, gave him a specific term, but, nonetheless, they find, them, and he proceeds to help her out and stay behind. She manages to get the wand, his like magical wand that we see in the beginning, him whirling it around and creating all the stuff. Um, so she eventually finds the others, and she kind of admits that this is kind of her fault, as she kind of figures that the darkness, as they literally refer to it as the darkness, that she is the one responsible for it, and in the process, the animals, specifically Gilda, or Greta, or whatever her name was again, the warthog, and Boomer don't trust her anymore. And when they leave, she starts crying, and it's that moment in the movie where it's like, oh no, everything is gonna fail. Pretty big, obvious cliche, where I've seen it countless times. This movie definitely has a more annoying one than that. This one is, you tend to see it a lot in movies, so I'm not that annoyed by it. The one that I find particularly more annoying is that, I forget when this happens in the movie, but the Steve character admits that he has strong feelings for the warthog, the Gilda character, Greta, or whatever her name is. He proceeds to say that kind of early-ish in the movie, they don't have any sort of communication throughout most of the movie, and then at the end it's like, oh, I'll precipitate my feelings for you, and then it's like, oh, I also felt that way all along. Even though there was no, build-up to any of that. That is definitely one of those cliches that I am not particularly fond of. And because it does remind me of a few other animated movies, particularly where that happens, and that always kind of gets on my nerves. It's like, you couldn't even be bothered to develop these characters' relationships at all. It's just like, oh, we're in love, okay, bye. Anyway, so the others head off. The paper comes back to bother her. The blueprint, which I'm just gonna say it now. It's essentially a plot device to get her to move in the right direction. So she proceeds to head inside the metal spider thing that's somehow empty now. And then she, somehow puts together, all these ropes and pulleys and stuff to, start to move it on her own. And as she's moving it, she's a little bit careless at first, but then remembers what her mother said about being practical, so she slows it down, able to start fixing parts of the park. And in the process, Boomer ends up getting stuck on this roller coaster. It starts to head backwards, and they try to save him for a moment, and then they end up following him afterwards. So she pulls out the wand after all that nonsense, and then she says that she needs to deal with the darkness herself. So she starts to literally run towards it. And she gets pulled in where she says out loud that she is the wonder in Wonderland over and over again, and begins to make her way to Peanut, who is also already in the darkness. And she mentions how the light will beat the darkness. And this inspires him to build off of that light and make with the magic stuff and the tubes that make them able to get out of this scenario. And she also, with that paper, also figures out that the puzzle was actually in the vein of her name spelled out. So they trace over like the exact way that they need to in real life, or in this fantasy, I suppose. And as I mentioned, after they solve the problem, as I mentioned, the porcupine admits his feelings, and again, the warthog reciprocates those feelings, even though, as I mentioned earlier on, there was no build up or communication between those 2 points. Which, again, is something I am not a fan of at all, by the way. Um, so, her and Peanut, they talk, and then so on and so forth. Darkness is swandered after all of that nonsense, but it's not completely gone. It's just not as noticeable as it was. And we get more of that shilling of this weird relationship that just, again, builds up out of nowhere, where she, the warthog, kisses the porcupine, and then I guess that just cements their relationship. I get whatever. So, anyways, June heads out, saying that she needs to return home, and she does so, and thus proceeds to start to work on rebuilding the park that she, dreamed of and all that stuff. And oh, so conveniently, when she starts rebuilding is when the mom returns healthy again from whatever sickness. Thus, June proceeds to invite all the kids that, are already like, yeah, to build the stuff and stuff. So she proceeds to whisper to the monkey for their next little collaboration extravaganza, which involves some of the kids, and that is where the movie ends on Wonder Park. Putting controversy aside, whatever controversy that is, I think this movie's fine, honestly. I don't, there is a lot of conveniences throughout the movie, major, plot, as I mentioned, the paper sort of acts as the plot device, kind of moving her from point to point, throughout the movie. And, it does have things that I am not particularly fond of. Again, the whole relationship thing that just sort of, it's like, oh, I have feelings for her. And then the movie proceeds, and it's like, oh, I have feelings for you. Oh, I have feelings for you too. It's just such bad writing on that point. And again, this isn't the first animated movie where I have seen this. I'm trying to think of the other animated movie that I immediately think of every time I see this. I know there's more than one as well, but none of them are coming to mind at the moment. In terms of that, that is where the writing is obviously weak. Moments where I think where the writing is a little bit more on point is dealing with X sickness. I'm just going to call it that because I'm not going to point to what sickness it actually is. A story about a girl dealing with that. I think that, where that is the focus of the movie, and where her dream lies is primarily where the focus of this movie should be. And in terms of that, I think they do well enough in terms of writing. And I know this is going to sound weird, but based on one of the sayings that I created is, show us what we need to see, tell us what we need to hear. And in this case, I do believe that they tell us something we need to hear. So I don't think it's necessarily bad writing. I just think, they had to explain it because, again, I think this movie has a tendency to be sort of geared toward a younger audience, but kind of pushing towards, like, a bad thing may happen in your life, one of those kinds of movies, but, how to get through it or whatever. Um, in terms of, again, specifying things, I think the movie telling us what this darkness actually is actually really welcomed in this scenario. Because in terms of light and dark, those words in particular are usually very broad, and just had left leaving it as that is the darkness, and just leaving it at that, again, that could just mean so much. That there's such a broad net of what that could actually mean. Um, but luckily, they do specify that the darkness was a direct result of, like, as soon as the mother got sick, and then the daughter getting sad and depressed and wanting to give up on the dream. That is what the darkness represents, that sort of specific sadness, and I am also glad that near the end that they specify that the darkness isn't completely gone, because of course it wouldn't be. You can't, I think that actually is a very crucial point to the movie, is that the darkness never truly goes away. That sadness never truly goes away, that depression never truly goes away. It can just be significantly shrunken by the light, or in this case, the hope of the dream of, in her case, the park, but, in a more broad spectrum, whatever your dream is, and if you have the companionship of family and friends, in her case, that light will be shining brighter because you will have that by your side. And again, in that retrospect, again, I do think that the writing, there is some writing praise right there. And again, there are other points where the writing does become a hindrance, so it's sort of left in the middle. I would say, toward the middle-ish section where she starts to enter into this park, a huge chunk of the movie is sort of predicated to her just sort of running about with animal friends, and sort of dealing with that. So, I'm not gonna say this movie is awful by any means. It has some good writing moments. The characters, there are quite a few of them, so they're not as specified. They sort of all take up this one role, and that does remind me of other things that predicate towards that, kind of like Winnie the Pooh, or examples of that, where you have your characters that tend to have that smaller bit of personality or whatever. So in terms of an overall score, I would give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's halfway decent. Definitely some of the ideas work, some of the ideas do not work. There is a bit of stretchiness to the film, in regards to, like, there's a bit more of a flash to it rather than substance all the time. And it is what it is. So yeah, that is my review of Wonder Park. I don't think it's awful. I don't think it's great. I just think it's It's somewhere in the middle. And that is my review of Wonder Park. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One to head you over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.